Hi, folks. Welcome to today's webinar. I'm Roxanne Petraeus. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Athena, a AI-powered compliance training company. And today we're going to dig into exactly that, powered by AI, what that means. For a little bit of context, Kelly and I bumped into each other at a compliance conference last year and essentially had the "wouldn't it be great if" type of conversation where we said, wouldn't it be great if we could have a series of discussions on AI and compliance, where we bring together experts exactly like we've done today with this great panel that Matt will introduce shortly. And we give time and space for each of the topics that we think are most pressing for ethics and compliance leaders as it relates to AI. And most importantly, that we can kind of have candid discussions and debates instead of just kind of keeping things at a very high level. AI, there are risks and opportunities. We really wanted a space where we could dig into and even have conflicting views on AI and ethics and compliance. Fast forward, and here we are in the second of our six series webinar. Encourage you all to sign up for the whole thing. There's some really great topics here, but I know that today is an exciting one because all of you are struggling with the same issue, which is powered by AI is popping up left, right, and center in your washing machines and your vendors. And you probably want a framework to think about that. And so I'm going to turn it over to Matt, who's going to facilitate a really great discussion on exactly that.
Yes, all right. Thank you very much, Roxanne, and thank you everybody for joining us today. As Roxanne just said, our goal here with this session today is really to talk about vendor risks and vendor risk management, which is not a new challenge for compliance and audit executives. However, as more and more vendors introduce AI into the products that they are bringing to your business, what are you supposed to do about that? You might come from a background of thinking, okay, vendors, they've been bringing cybersecurity risks to us. They've been bringing compliance risks to us. This isn't a wholly novel threat, and it's not. However, AI, I think, is probably not like the cybersecurity risks or the privacy risks or the other issues that vendors have posed for a while. So it's going to be a new set of challenges that you have to think about. Even if you have an answer of, I want to address it this way, are you going to do it? Is somebody in your IT security department does it? This assumes you actually have a good vendor risk management program in the first place, which is not always the case for some companies. So there's a lot to think through. So joining us to talk about that, in addition to me and Roxanne, first we have Seth Bahraini. He is the legal product counsel at a software firm called 650.com. 650 is another one of the AI-powered compliance platforms out there that would help you understand what all of your legal obligations are, and they're trying to do that with AI. But Seth, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Matt. Good to be here.
And also with us is Carrie Miller. She is the executive director of the AI Procurement Lab, which is a nonprofit effort that is trying to figure out how could we try to get ahead of AI procurement issues. What sort of standards would you use? Are they that different from previous standards? If they are, how do we fill in that gap and questions like that? But Carrie also has been thinking a lot about these issues. So Carrie, thank you as well.
Thanks for having me. What a delicious topic today.
And then, as we said in our first episode a couple of weeks ago, certainly for any listeners here, we are doing this to bring some advantage to you. So if you have questions or comments that you want us to discuss, you can put them in the webinar chat. In theory, we will save up your questions for the last 10 or 15 minutes. In practice, if you ask a really good question, we'll try and weave that into the discussion as soon as we can. So whatever is on your mind as a listener, just let us know and we'll try and be as responsive to that as possible. I am going to start by, I guess, asking some table setting questions here. And maybe, Carrie, I'll put it to you first, and then Seth and Roxanne. Like I said a few minutes ago, everybody listening already knows that, okay, vendors pose risks. They even pose technology and IT risks. What is different about when the vendor says, and now we're powered by AI, and you, dear customer, you have our AI? Like, how big of a difference is this compared to what our listeners have been thinking about already? Carrie, what would you say?
Well, this has to be one of the number one questions we get at the procurement lab because vendors keep kind of pushing in these little AI tools or whatever they're doing. They just keep showing up in random ways in your systems. And so I'll just tell you what advice we keep giving people. You have to prioritize these things. So the first thing we ask people to do is to establish, it's like a hotline to if someone has abused you in your workplace setting, you got to, here it is. There's one of these happening again. So that someone somewhere knows about it. Okay. So once you've identified it, you detected it, then the next thing is to, it's triage, right? So you prioritize it. You decide, is this worth my time to deal with right this minute? Or, can I put it off? Here's our rule of thumb generally. First of all AI can mess with your data. So you really do have to kind of scrutinize it.
Mhm.
But if it is showing up in a core aspect of your business, if you're in insurance and a little piece of AI just showed up in your actuary software, ding, 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 let's stop and see what we've got going on there. If it is AI that just showed up in a little piece of software in your insurance business that you use for party planning, lunches, somewhere, like, okay, I'll deal with that in the contract renewal phase. Maybe that's not that big of a deal. So you prioritize, and you may need to reset that whole contract in that moment to deal with risk management in that moment. Otherwise, it may just be cyclical and you deal with the contract when it comes up. So that's just a very quick broad brush. I'll give some others time to respond.
Seth, what would you say about this? And how much is AI fundamentally different than all the other vendor risks we've worried about before?
Yeah, definitely. I think I'll kind of build off what Carrie was saying about how important it is to kind of know where the AI is coming into your business, because I would say they're not fundamentally different in kind. Really, it's just kind of a new avenue for risks that we're already familiar with to kind of come to pass, right? You still have the same concerns over data privacy, over confidentiality, over bias, over all this stuff, but now there's kind of a new, intimidating, vague kind of tool that could lead these risks or let these risks into your business kind of through new avenues. So same kind of stuff, just a new route to it, I would say.
All right. And then, Roxanne, give me your thoughts. And, I'm stuck on the idea. I look at it through the lens of something like if some vendor is going to be providing me spreadsheets, or I don't know, I'll just say Microsoft Office. We've all used that. Spreadsheets are only going to behave in a certain way forever. But I'm assuming that AI is going to evolve over time. Like it does different things. And then I make other decisions based on what it tells me. And that AI seems categorically more of a pressing risk than what we've been used to before. But I don't know. What would you say, Roxanne?
Yeah, I think this is obviously a place where like reasonable people can disagree. I think my perspective is that as we get more used to this, as the years kind of go on, we'll stop talking about AI as a discrete technology and it will sort of fade into the idea of like technology in general. And therefore, paradigms that come from data privacy and cybersecurity will work really well. I think of an example that a lawyer had told me about a long time ago. Screenshot technology, where you can take a screenshot. This introduced risks that you wouldn't have thought of before that technology. And it's like the same sort of challenges with any technology is like at the end of the day, it's actually just the people using your technology. So the story he told was this company thought they were being very smart and locked down and blocked, so like sort of blacklisted the domains of various screen sharing technology. And then he walked around and saw employees with their phones taking pictures instead of screen sharing. And so just kind of one of those examples of like the technology can be new and novel and introduce in some ways like really different capabilities. And then at the end of the day, it's sort of like a very simple, like, how are people going to use this? And I think that the frameworks that, for example, folks at data privacy have used for a long time, like actually can get you quite far in thinking about AI.
It's funny. I can remember when I first started writing about compliance and IT risk. This would have been 25 years ago. And there was a CEO speaking at a conference and said, look, we have a great IT risk management policy. Employees ask us to do something. We tell them no. That was it. And maybe in 2000, that would have worked. However, here and now, to your point about people taking screen grabs with their phones, like there isn't going to be any way really to prevent this. On the other hand, we're going to have so many risks that will require ongoing monitoring, I guess. And like honestly, I remain unconvinced that a lot of companies have managed IT risk so far. And now along comes AI that is going to turn up the need for this all the way up to 11. I guess, let me back up a bit before we panic about AI risks specifically. Companies have had to worry about tech vendors and their risks that they pose to your organization for 20 years now. So, what are these basics around how you would find out where these IT risks are coming in through your vendors, contract management or testing or onboarding or whatnot? Let me mix up the answers here. Seth, I'll ask you first and then Carrie and then Roxanne. But like, what should we be able to do, AI or not, to find out where these risks are and try and get ahead of them?
Sure. And I mean, I could talk for hours about all the different things we could do
Sure.
and should do, really, but I could just kind of distill it down to some kind of core points that come up a lot in my work. On the contract management side, you really want to make sure that you're putting in provisions in your contracts with vendors that are going to give you some type of oversight over how they're operating. And, if you're sending them data, you want to be able to know and get information on what they're doing with that data. And ideally, you want to be able to have a kind of a kill switch for yourself, where if these audits, when you're looking at the AI or looking at what they're doing, aren't showing up positively, or you're seeing risks that aren't being adequately addressed, you need to kind of be able to pull yourself out of that. And that's always been the case, right? No matter what you're kind of getting, what type of tool you're getting from somebody, you still want to be able to have the ability to kind of quality control it, right? As you're using it both in the onboarding session and then also kind of throughout the life of that contract. So I think that is an example of the fact that just a lot of the traditional kind of risk management techniques are still hugely useful and relevant in the AI context. It's just going to be more about, again, kind of identifying the risks. Maybe gets a little bit harder, and figuring out what kinds of what are the metrics for success or failure, and that kind of stuff can be a little bit more tricky.
Mm.
But I think a lot of those basics still hold up true in this field.
Uh, Carrie, what would you say there? And in particular, maybe I'm wondering if even if you have these basics, like a right to audit or vigorous onboarding or something in your contract, like it strikes me that you're going to need to dig deeper into the vendor because AI is not like a spreadsheet. And, I can test a spreadsheet pretty easily, I think. But I'm not sure what you'd need to do to evaluate the AI of a vendor. Like you're going to have to dig in further, assuming you even have the mechanics in place. But Carrie, walk us through what you see here.
Yeah, I know there's a couple more questions coming, so I'm going to pace myself through some of what we have, the research that we have from the procurement lab.
Sure.
I'm going to start at the beginning because oftentimes what we're seeing, the trend that we're seeing, raise your hand if you see this, knock, knock, knock. Hey, I'm a vendor of AI stuff and it does magical things. I'm going to fix everything for you. Take it. We'll give you a little trial. And all of a sudden, you've adopted something for a little trial period and now it's in your house, right? So maybe what a better practice would be is to do your root cause analysis, make sure you have an actual, legitimate business use case. And in that use case, what our research, what we find is that when you really dig down to your root cause and you find out what's the data, was it the people, was it the data, is the process broken? When you get to that level and then you come from there to develop your procurement, you are in a much better position to identify what the AI risks are going to be, because you know who your stakeholders are going to be, how they might be impacted. So you can write what we call a risk aware solicitation. That's when you know better questions to ask your vendors, how you want to ask those questions, what artifacts you really want to see from them. So you're evaluating them even better. So it really begins at the beginning of just actually having a legit need. Yeah. And there's more to come on that. I know we have some more questions. So I'm going to finish all the way through the end of the contract as we go through this webinar. So don't anybody leave.
I guess one question I'll throw out, maybe Roxanne, if you want to give your observations, or either Seth or Carrie, like, are companies still even good at that part? Like, I'll put it that way. Like, I think, Carrie, for example, you're giving some great thoughtful analysis of how you should structure your procurement function. However, that assumes that you have one. A lot of companies might not. And if they are ceding procurement of this to the business units that need the stuff, I could perhaps see that they are not as aware of this. So I'm still curious how overall mature and robust our ability to assess and onboard vendors is. And then we get into the stickiness of AI, and we can circle back to that. But like Roxanne and Seth, and then Carrie, maybe back to you at the end. Like, what do you think about, are we able to do this right now, even before things get harder?
Yeah, I mean, it's like tough to answer, like for everyone, right? Like companies are different levels of maturity and all of that. I'd say like, reflecting internally, I kind of have two roles. I'm a vendor for compliance professionals. And so I see procurement through that lens of like when Athena is being brought into an organization, but then I'm a CEO. And so I have a bunch of wonderful but needy employees who will, kind of like bubble up and say, we have identified this need. Here's an example that's just like top of mind. It came up today. Knowledge management, right? Every company struggles with that. You have people in the company who ask the same questions over and over, and it's been answered somewhere. And usually the answer is like it's in a wiki or it's in this. And AI has actually in some ways a phenomenal tool to level up companies' knowledge management, where things just have lived in messages and emails and whatever, and you can kind of consolidate and then search it in natural language. So I think yeah, super reasonable idea to bring on a vendor to improve our internal knowledge management. I love the, kind of going to Carrie's point, like, I don't think it's a solution in search of a problem. I think there's a real business problem that we face. I think AI is actually the right tool here. And then our teams kind of kick off. I think they're very smart and thoughtful, with our legal team and our security and IT teams, which vendors they're going to be comfortable with, shortlist, go through a process, et cetera. So like from my vantage point, both of being a vendor, we get asked really smart questions. So like one of the ways we're incorporating AI is into being able to deliver our customers custom little videos. So if you have a specific scenario in anti-bribery that shows up for your team, historically, you may have had a vendor, shoot that in a studio. That's expensive, that's time consuming. You can't always make quick edits. And so now Athena offers AI powered videos that still look really good and sleek, whatever. And our customers ask us really smart questions. Hey, where's my data going? Who has IP ownership? And I think that, it's incumbent on us as a vendor to have answers that feel really compelling. So long-winded way of saying, I think I'm like generally pretty optimistic on humans, both from my vendor perspective and my being, the person that gets asked a lot, like, can I buy this vendor?
Actually, I know that we have a polling question along these lines. If our logistics people can push that out to the audience there. And and we'll get the results back up in a minute here. And how confident are you that your current third-party risk system can handle AI risks from vendors? And if everybody could just take a moment, give us your thoughts. We'll pull the answers up maybe in about 30 seconds or so. There you go. Host and panelists can't vote, so I'll call.
I just discovered that as well, Matt. I wanted to vote my optimism.
But, I guess maybe, Seth, I'll put this question to you first, and then Carrie, as we're waiting for the results to come back. What are some of the new questions companies should be trying to answer about AI-infused vendors? Like, what are some of these risks that we need to be thinking about and weave into, I don't know, a new questionnaire, something like that? Seth, what would be on your mind?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think this is when you really start to get into the AI specific kind of stuff. And like you need to understand how the AI tools work in order to kind of even be able to have a conversation with a vendor about whether it's going to meet your needs and whether you're going to be able to avoid risks, right? Like on kind of a very basic level, a lot of what we're talking about when we say AI is going to be some type of an algorithm system or something that is kind of taking inputs on one end, processing them, and producing outputs out the other side in some way, shape, or form. And so the kind of stuff that you get into once you're trying to evaluate that system is like, is the data that they're feeding into the input side, does that make sense? Is that data that is going to be useful for this program to be able to generate whatever outputs are coming out the other side, you know? Then there's even the very technical side of like, how is it making these types of predictions? Like, what is going on in that black box between inputs and outputs, you know? And then kind of on the other side, what are the outputs it's generating? How are they measuring them? You know, those types of they can sound pretty technical, and in some cases they can be. Those kind of questions I think are posed specifically by AI in ways we haven't really seen up until this point.
Here's our poll results. People are generally somewhat confident in their vendor risks, and a few brave souls,
Right.
looks like about 8 or 9% are quite confident. So we will obviously have you people on when we do this again next year. But Carrie, what would you say about more of the AI specific risks? And, you know, to Seth's point, you'd want to know, where did that data come from that the algorithm is using to think? So, I mean, can you ask a vendor to show it? What if they don't want to? What if they're not sure? You know, like, I can think of a host of ways that this gets very sticky very quickly. But Carrie, what would you say?
There's a lot to be said. So there's three areas. I compartmentalize this question into three buckets. Seth just described what I'll call the middle bucket. So let me do the first bucket. The first bucket is organizational governance. So you want to make sure that from a leadership perspective in that organization that you're about to hire, that they are pretty solid. Let me back up. There is a maturity curve. Like, we can't expect everyone to be perfect governance, you know, people, right? So, but you're going to investigate, how are you doing on your AI governance? You know, do you have the right kind of people in place? Did you have policies? Do you believe in, you know, principles of trust and, you know, all the things we want to see, you know, debiasing and all that stuff from a leadership perspective. And you're going to evaluate those things by seeing, show me the policy. Show me your training log that your people got trained on, you know, these types of principles, right? So that's bucket number one, is just overall cultural leadership stuff. Bucket number two is, how'd you build the system? What'd you put in it? Did you put good data in it? Was it consented data? Is it sloppy data? What model did you use? Oh, you're not going to tell me that? All right, well, you know what? Then how is it scoring? You know, tell me what the measurements are. How's it working? Is it interpretable at all? And you might have to have them say, do you have a third-party certificate of, you know, audit that you can show me? Maybe somebody else came in and looked at it. They may or may not be able to do that. They may or may not be willing to do that. So that's where we're stuck a little bit right now in this space. The last bucket is the user bucket. Like, I'm actually going to use this system every day, right? That's where we talk about explainability. And that's where your evidence is going to be, can you show me some of that? Like, what does a user see if they have difficulty? You know, some of these systems are complicated. Some of them are high risk. You know, HR systems are high risk. What is the explainability of telling me how that decision was made? How do I adjust my action to get a different response? So those are your three buckets that when you're designing your RFP, you want to make sure you ask questions in those three buckets.
All right. Roxanne, give me some of your thoughts there about how companies might do that. Like, I think Carrie brings up an excellent point that you'd want to assess the leadership and the governance and sort of the AI awareness of a vendor. I don't know how you do that. I don't know how the vendors would necessarily feel about it. I don't think they'd be opposed to it, but I do know that with most software, I'm not necessarily sure you would really have to think about that. I'll keep on defaulting to my example of, like, if you're going to source spreadsheets, can it build me a pivot table? Great. After that, I don't know that I'd be that much concerned about the governance of the vendor. So there are other elements here that you'd need to evaluate that I don't know that companies are equipped for it. But what would you think?
Definitely. Okay, so I think that maybe that one area that I think AI might be different, like a historical break in general. I'm kind of on the AI is just a continuation of technology, but it is like a step change function, or, you know, it's some pretty big leap forward. I think we could like all agree on that. And so I think when you're looking for a vendor, you're really ideally looking for a partner to figure out AI with you, because the like wild thing about this technology is how rapidly it's getting better. And so you're not just looking for someone who can kind of solve your right now problem. Ideally, you're looking for a vendor who's going to be continuing to like innovate and figure out the best use cases of AI. And so from that perspective, I think you are looking for an AI forward vendor. And I think that means two things. One is, yes, the governance, right? You don't want to see a vendor who, when you ask like really reasonable questions about data privacy, sort of can't produce like answers that feel like, I can see Seth smiling as a lawyer, like, your legal team should be able to knock on these answers and feel like they're pretty solid. But I think like this is just like my personal perspective. I think you should also be looking for legitimate thought leadership from the vendor, because the idea of like what you see today, the model capabilities and all of that is going to be so different in 6 months that you don't want to move over all of your systems, go through all this pain, and then only to find out that this vendor like really isn't leaning forward in an intelligent way. And so like this is a really simple thing that we do is like I just had to spend a ton of time with our customers doing AI lunch and learn. So I share like data and where I'm seeing AI usage across customers. I share insights into our product roadmap. Here's where we're going to build out AI next. I'm thinking about this. What do you think? And like the reason I do this is that I think it hopefully gives someone confidence that if they're going to go through the whole pain of this process, procurement, et cetera, that we're going to be thinking about where AI is going, not just like the technology as it stands today. So like, in some ways, again, it's not that novel. It's like, does the vendor seem smart and thoughtful? Can they answer questions? Like, well, last thing, and then I'll pause. I'm not your technology guru, right? Like I have a wonderful CTO who's a co-founder, and my husband's very smart. And those are the two people that I go to when I've encountered any sort of complex technological problem in my life. So in no way should you think that I'm like a CS wizard. And I think that people who are really smart on these topics should be able to explain it to you in a way that feels satisfying. If you start to feel like there's a bunch of words and acronyms that are just kind of distracting, and when you ask questions like, okay, but explain to me how it's going to solve my workflow, and you walk away feeling like this was a bit of smoke and mirrors, like in my opinion, that's actually not a reflection on you, a compliance official who likely doesn't have deep technological background, right? It'd be really difficult for all of us to be tech experts and experts in another field. So yeah, that's just something else I've learned along the way, is like the best technologists, the most forward-thinking folks can break it down in a way that is very intelligible to a non-engineer.
Well, I mean, that is a good point. And it's kind of the counter to what I was saying with my spreadsheet example. And I'll stop with the spreadsheets, but something like say, blood testing software, if you're in life sciences or pharmaceuticals. Historically, if I needed that software, it just had to say, did it test positive or negative? And the software is never going to change over time once you do it. But AI is different. Like, I mean, it could probably do a lot of things for me in 6 or months or 18 months from now, and I don't know what that is. So it's a fair
But
point.
Matt, you're looking for that humility. Like that's what I think some of the smartest people I know on AI are not giving the answer of AI is always flawless. Like they're actually really rooted in where I was just watching a video that we were creating for a customer, and it was a woman walking through an airport and surprised she has a third hand because it's AI generated, and sometimes AI gives someone a third hand. And we have always tried to be really clear on I think you're actually looking for expertise that is humble about AI and is honest about its flaws. And if you kind of hear an answer of like, oh, hallucinations, they don't happen with my software, or is that's another red flag. Got me on my soapbox, Matt, so I'll get off now.
I mean, Seth, you get on this soapbox for a while and give me your thoughts about this, that, it's valid to raise that AI is going to be an evolving technology solution. So you might not necessarily know, or me, the corporate buyer, I don't quite know what it will be able to do for me in 18 months. So does that mean I should be thinking about it differently when I'm looking around trying to find the right vendor and risk assess them?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it kind of comes back to what I think maybe Roxanne or Carrie was saying about like wanting to find a partner more so than just someone who's vending you a product. Because back to the spreadsheets briefly, if you're just buying an established product that's easy to assess and you understand how it works, maybe you can just buy that off the shelf and then you're kind of done. But where AI is and kind of how little we know about it now and how much it's growing, any company that's putting out any kind of AI product needs to be forward looking. And I would encourage folks to do that kind of assessment of, just kind of the BS test, right? Like when you're talking to these people, and I really, really love what Roxanne said about intelligent people who are in this field know how to explain it to people without needing an engineering degree. Because at bottom, like it's simple stuff that we're trying to do, right? Like to use an example for maybe the financial sector, like we have an algorithm that makes a recommendation of whether to give somebody a loan based on past, information about their credit history. It's very intuitive to explain, oh, if you didn't pay a loan in the past, maybe you're not going to do it again. The nuts and bolts that go on in the kind of program, while important, are maybe not the thing that I think you want to key into, especially in this kind of early stage of AI where we are sort of figuring this out together as sort of an industry. So I think big picture is a good place to start.
Um, Carrie, I want to come back to you to talk a bit more about the middle and third buckets that you'd mentioned before, where you do want to evaluate how is the AI product actually working? Can it be explainable? Other things like that. I guess my first question is, A, do we have a suitable framework for companies to be able to do that? Because if you're evaluating a vendor on cybersecurity, you might use something like a SOC 2 audit. I'm going to guess that a SOC 2 audit isn't sufficient for what we're talking about. If it's not, do we have a standard or not? But I'm also stuck on who's actually going to do that. If you are a compliance officer, odds are you're a lawyer, and you, lawyer, evaluating technical things on an AI product seems like a high risk on its own because we are not tech savvy people. So I don't necessarily know that companies like, so who does that then? Does the IT security people do it? Does somebody else do it? Do we not have that? But Carrie, what would you say?
It's so funny because you sent me these questions in advance and I had pulled them over into Word. When I had that one, I put in big, I actually made it 48 font and I wrote not AI. So I can tell you who should not do it. And that is not AI. So don't let AI evaluate your vendors, not your AI vendors, especially. Just don't do that. That is a legal risk beyond compare. And I'm hearing that is happening. So that's my public service announcement today. However, this is what our research shows is that, and this is just good practice, is to establish, based on the questions that you've asked, establish a rubric for how you want those answers to look. We use AI to do that. We use AI to help us establish the rubric. We make it a team sport because guess what? Just like Roxanne's saying, not all of us have all the answers. So we sat down with the rubric to make sure that we understand what we're getting out of it. So when the answers come in, that we know what we're looking for. We can give it a quantitative score that's defensible, so we don't have to worry about that part too. But the evaluation of the answers to answer that part of the question is usually done by a team because it takes the business unit leader, whoever's in need of that software, plus tech, plus risk and compliance. It's a team issue. As far as a framework, I have been leaning on ISO 42001.
Mm-hmm.
That is, to me, the gold standard right now. It serves a great purpose. It deals with leadership capacity and it deals with the bucket 2 controls and leans into that bucket 3. So it's flexible, it's readable. You don't have to be a brain surgeon to read it. If you are in Europe, it covers a lot of the EU AI Act. It doesn't cover all of it, but it gets you really well started on that compliance. It covers Colorado's AI Act for the most part. I mean, it's really a good one. I know NIST AI RMF's out there too, but I just really like ISO 42001. It's $140 some. It's worth the purchase to look at it. That you can get certified in it. It's not, that's my go-to.
All right. Now, that is the technical standard there. I am still I think a lot about who is the personnel structure to oversee all of this. And maybe I'll circle back to Seth and then Roxanne. I agree with Carrie. And I think, we all knew that you'd probably say something like it is going to have to be a team. But then my next question is, okay, so who's the captain of the team or who's the chairman of the committee who gets to decide we will do this, we won't do that. This risk is too great. Does the compliance person get to be the one who makes that final call, or should they be? Of course, this is a compliance audience. I'm all for compliance running the show. But in a real business, I could see, first line business units saying, no, 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 this is going to be an awesome application. We're going to do it anyways. And I can see a lot of give and take there, and it could be really difficult. So who would be really in charge of trying to evaluate this when there's so many different dimensions to it? Like, Seth, what would you say? And then Roxanne, what would you say?
I mean, selfishly, I love the compliance folks. That'd be my vote personally, because that's where I come from.
Yeah.
But I think in practice, maybe a way to think about it is you want different people to kind of have almost veto power depending on the type of risk that they might be kind of proficient in understanding, right? Like because you want to have a full team, you want to get all the answers in all those three buckets Carrie's talking about. And maybe if the big red flag is a governance one, then maybe it's somebody who's more on the compliance or on the business side of it. If the big red flag is a technical issue where, someone in your IT team can say, listen, everything they said is great, the company looks great, in theory it's awesome, but like this tech does not work, then they need to be able to kind of step in and override maybe what the other folks might think. And maybe you have somebody kind of from a big strategic perspective saying, like, even if this company's great and the tech works, if that underlying like input to output doesn't serve our needs or won't for some reason or another, then you want that person who has that kind of familiarity with what you want to do with it to kind of be able to have veto power there. So I think it's got to be collaborative, and I think at a certain point you want a bunch of people to be able to press that red button, I think,
All right.
if they need to.
Roxanne, what would you say? What Seth is describing sounds excellent to me. It sounds like having an AI adoption framework, and the company has to think this through, and a governance model and whatnot. But Roxanne, what would you say?
I mean, I think that is exactly right. Like, no notes from my perspective. I think maybe the only lens I'd offer is sort of a almost like human or psychological one. So we have some really great compliance advisors, and I'm forgetting which one told me this, but some version of like, if you want the business to really listen to you, they need to feel like you are not the Department of No, that you are enabling them to go quickly. And that's why you're raising flags. And I think like, raise your hand if you feel pressure to adopt AI. Like, I would argue that like everybody does, like in all of my conversations, compliance teams feel immense pressure. And I think remembering that that's why your like colleagues are coming to you saying, I need to onboard this vendor, is like everyone feels pressure to be more efficient, to show leadership that they have really taken the directive of we're, AI first, we're leaning in, all gas, no brakes. And so I think just like, again, in my CEO hat, sometimes I can see like, let's say a revenue leader wants a tool and legal or IT comes in and raises a red flag. That can be really frustrating to that revenue leader who's like, I'm under pressure to hit, targets, and like, I've got this tool, it's going to make my life easier. And so I think just in the way you raise flags or concerns can go a long way to showing that you're partnering, and also figuring out like, what would we need to be able to say yes versus just what could feel more like a blanket no, will go a long way in getting that kind of soft buy-in that I think is really important. Because going back to the screenshots example, if people feel like you're just going to say no, they're probably going to like go around you, and that I think is ultimately far more risky.
Yes, I would agree with that 100%. We have another polling question that we wanted to push out to the audience, if we could get that out. Although, Roxanne, I wanted to just add on. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal just last week. I wrote about it earlier today. Fantastic, talking about employees feeling pressured to use AI. And they're, according to one of the big consulting firms out there that did a big study, they found that there is a sharp difference between CEOs and senior managers thinking AI is awesome. My AI adoption plan is going great. It's saving us a ton of time. And middle and lower level employees, who are all a large number of them, saying, well, I mean, it's not bad, but 40% of them said it saves them no time. 20% said it saves them maybe an hour a week. And there was a big divergence between what CEOs think and what everybody else thinks about how successful AI adoption is. But the employees were saying, I feel a lot of pressure to use AI because I'm being told to use AI, but I haven't yet figured out exactly what I'm supposed to do. It was a very interesting article.
Yeah.
Reading, if you can track it down. It does raise some questions about, maybe their roles will be redesigned, and 10 years from now, they'd give very different answers. But today, there's definitely a divergence. Our poll question, I don't know if we have the results yet, but they'll be up in a moment.
Matt,
I
I need to come back in because there's a tool that we use to manage what you were just talking about. And it's a simple tool. Oh, what do we got here? Wait a minute. I want to see
Breaking
the poll
news.
question. Oh,
We can't properly assess or monitor. That is their biggest concern over AI adoption. All right, well,
oh,
that's
okay.
by
All
a
right.
bit. Yeah.
Let me do this tool real quick. We use a risk register when we evaluate vendors. So go back to when I said no one's perfect. Like no one is perfect. So when we do each evaluation, so you get your RFP's responses back in, as you're going through them, you just use a register, right? It's just like any risk register you've ever seen in your life. And we document, here's the risk. I think you should have a whistleblower, hotline or policy. You're big enough. And so your mitigation is that has to be in place before, if we sign with you, it has to be in place before we start the contract or within 30 days of the contract. And you list them all out, whatever they are. You prioritize them high, medium, low, however, 1 through 5, whatever. And you go back before as you're in your negotiation. And to me, that is where you're in a no go situation. So it takes the onus off of one party to veto and puts it back into the holistic perspective of, okay, we've mitigated as much as we can. We're not going to get a perfect solution because they couldn't do these things. That means we need to do these things on our own.
Mhm.
And that's how you get to a realistic, world with AI right now. So I just wanted to put that out there.
All right. I want to talk about a couple of other risk management challenges we have. And actually, I want to pick up on something that our survey just now, the polling results kind of called out, was the number 2 risk there that people worry about on this webinar is that the vendors aren't telling you that they have implemented AI. So I guess that was one question I wanted to ask. Maybe, Seth, I'll start with you here. Is it the case that you need to kind of agree with a vendor on this is what AI is? If you do this, I'm going to say you've put AI into the product, and so I'm going to evaluate you differently, like basic terminology stuff. You would think that's not that hard, but I'm suspect you're going to tell me actually it is harder, and we do need to struggle with this. Is that fair?
I think it is fair. Yeah, it's a topic that we bring up a lot on the webinars we do internally at 650. But like, what does AI mean, right? Like we think about things like Chat GPT or Gemini that are like modeling human intelligence, and that's certainly true. But it also includes, I keep coming back to algorithms, but a lot more simple uses of technology that still have that black box component raise all the same risks. So I think it would definitely benefit to have some kind of a conversation about what AI means to you and kind of how, if it's used or deployed in the tool in a certain way, when you'll start kind of raising those red flags. And it's also, I think, important to kind of understand where the vendor might be deploying AI in relation to kind of the tool that you are buying, just to use 650 as an example, right? A lot of what we offer are documents. So like employee contracts, handbooks, all that stuff. None of that uses AI. It's all done with like JavaScript coding. We have an AI that we use to kind of basically answer people's employment law questions. So it's like that's an integration of AI that does, I'm not saying that our customers shouldn't be aware of that and kind of consider it, but it's not affecting the core product. And if it is, then that's the kind of thing you want to be more, I think, kind of concerned about and more wary than if it's just sort of a background or like a bonus offering.
Here's a comment from some listeners saying, shouldn't we just assume that all vendors have or will have AI at some point? That's probably true. But I do take Seth's point that, what type of AI are we talking about and what type of risks would you have depending on the type of AI? Like generative AI is new and it's cool and it's what we talk about. People have used predictive AI for at least 10 or 15 years. That's AI. We didn't have these very concerning sort of webinars back then. But maybe Roxanne and then Carrie, give me your thoughts on this. Something as simple as like if your vendor switches from one LLM to another, are they supposed to tell people this? Is it something that you'd want to know? If they tell you, what are you supposed to do with it? So there are questions I have about that sort of stuff as well, like just trying to define the contours of what is the AI that we're supposed to worry about. Do we even know what it is? But Roxanne, what would you say? And then Carrie.
I think that maybe the like most useful thing I can offer here is more of a thinking about like where are you most concerned that like a predictive versus deterministic workflow could really cause issues, and then focusing heavily on the questions there, because I think realistically like you do have to prioritize efforts. There should be smart frameworks. I think Seth went over them, and like the things that I'm most familiar with are the questions we get asked as a vendor. So like what sub-processors do you use, et cetera, and having like a really clear framework for sharing and disclosing that information. But I saw like a question that came in through the Q&A function about where is compliance using AI, and so maybe I'll just like take that as a kind of example of a perspective I hold is that I think that for compliance, AI is useful when it can like save you time or amplify an experience or something like that. You probably don't want to have it in your most like high risk activities that also are low frequency. Like that's probably the quadrant that you would want to like stay away from. So something I'm seeing is that where I don't see a lot of AI use is AI as a co-pilot for investigations. So that would be having like AI sitting in on, a Zoom call that you're having as part of a compliance investigation. I think that's really smart to stay away from areas that you think are both like very high risk, high sensitivity, and aren't necessarily the sorts of things that you do, like every day, all day, because your like risk reward is just off there. Whereas, for example, one of the areas we, Athena, as a vendor, we have two main products, like employee hotline and case management. So that's the area that it is sort of the most sensitive. We have not thought about, I think, Seth, this was kind of the point you're making, like putting AI into kind of a core workflow there, because we just, we don't think that our customers are asking for it. And I think that the like risk reward is off. We have found that in the training product is a great place to put AI because there's always a human review, right? Like everyone reviews their training before they send it out. And so that's not to say I think anyone evaluating Athena should just like gloss over, procurement and give a thumbs up. But I do think that like that's a good, maybe a good framework of where you want to like really deep dive on the vendor's AI is like how sensitive in nature is the data you're even sharing.
All right. Carrie, actually, since we have only about 10 minutes left, I did want to weave in a couple of more questions from listeners and a couple of other things. Carrie, I wanted to ask you a question about the specter of shadow AI that employees are using. Again, not a new concept because employees have been using shadow IT, and you people who do, you know who you are, and you're not supposed to. But, when you think about shadow AI and how scary or risky that could be, like, give me some thoughts there about how should we try to tackle this? I don't know that that's a technology challenge, or is it a people challenge and you have to win the minds of employees like, this is a bad idea, please don't do it. Carrie, what would you say?
It's both and.
It's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's both. I mean, it starts with people in education, and it's basic education. It's under helping them understand that there is real risk to the organization, to their data. It's AI can be really. It is amazing to me how clever and creative people can be with AI. I just am blown away sometimes at the creativity of these bad actors. It's just like, gosh, why don't you channel that energy to good? You could be really great. But, they don't. They just get inside of your little washing machine and all of a sudden, they're in your bank account. It's amazing. So it is education to people. And then, yes, from a tech side, there's observability that has to be done if, for large organizations and for the vendors. And it's, sometimes it's just stupid old school, someone left a password in a file and that's how we've always done it. It's sometimes that kind of stuff. And sometimes it is really corporate espionage and everything in between, prompt injections and all that stuff. So uh, there are a lot of observability platforms out there. So tomorrow I'm doing another webinar on this very topic, but specifically related to AI agents.
Yep.
So 2 days ago, I am scrolling through Facebook because it snowed and I'm bored. I came across N8N is a platform that you can build agents with these platforms, right? This guy is advertising his agents, right? And this is where I'm like, this is where shadow AI is happening. I just know it. Literally advertised that I could go buy like 14,000 AI agents. So I'm like, oh, this is fascinating. Click Etsy. It took me to Etsy. So next to stools and draperies, I could buy AI agents. So this is where we are now. So yes, people and tech.
Well,
And I don't even know what else.
let me riff off that a bit. Seth, I'll put this question to you because somebody was asking, is it possible that your vendor might not know that they are using AI in their product? And the idea of fourth party and fifth party risks, so on down the chain, that's really what that person is asking about. And so, I mean, I do think of something like employees who are frustrated on their job. They're trying to do their job. You, legal and compliance, you're the ones making it hard. So I'm just going to go get this AI agent that Carrie told me is available on Etsy. And now it's suddenly the agent is running around in my enterprise and my IT infrastructure, and Lord knows what happens. So I mean, I don't know. Is that an AI problem? Is it a cybersecurity problem? Is it both? Is it something else? And how are you supposed to think about that? Seth, what would you say?
Yeah, I tend to think it's a little bit of all of the above, and maybe it's kind of an internal governance problem. That's something we come back to is the importance of having a good AI use policy in place, right? Kind of an alarming number of businesses don't even have one at all that tells employees whether they can or can't do it. I think 650 actually, we're in the process of doing we call it the employment law survey, where we interview I think it's 350 HR professionals about these kinds of questions. And I think something like 61% of them said that they had no AI use policy at all. And so it might even be just not knowing on these employees' behalf, right? They think, oh, here's a tool that'll make my work easier. I'm going to go ahead and use it. And
Mhm.
so, first and foremost, figure out how much AI use you're okay with, write it down, and make sure your employees know it. So then, at the very least, you can say, okay, if this guy's still doing it, we know there's either some real ignorance or malicious intent, and you can kind of deal with it there. And then for the fourth and fifth party stuff, I think that comes back to contract management as well. Like make sure that you have provisions in your vendor contracts that kind of give you some say over that. Make sure you are aware who their sub processors are if you're sending data, because maybe if they're saying, oh, look, Gemini, Google is one of our sub processors and that's what we're going to use them for, then you can kind of flag and say, okay, even though they didn't tell us there's AI. So there's a couple things you can kind of do, I think.
It's interesting when you say that this is an all of the above problem because I have a good friend of mine who is an IT security auditor, and he would immediately say to our agent that we bought off of Etsy, it's like, well, hold on. If you have an employee empowered to put an AI agent on the network, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And he says, so often, so much of this is somebody somewhere in your organization has done something they should not have been allowed to do, straight up access control and like role control. And he then nerds out on ERP software, but he takes a very IT usage perspective of it. And I mean, he's not wrong to say that's how this happens. But I think it does get to the idea that, we still lack the effective oversight structures to do this efficiently. Um, let's see, one or two other questions. Somebody's just asking, can anyone point to where so far AI tools or processes are not a good fit? I don't know if anybody has any thoughts about that. Roxanne, you gave the example of investigations. So maybe Carrie or Seth, do you have other ideas of, where you would urge more caution that AI is not going to be is an easy of a fit and, go slow. But Carrie, what would you say? And then Seth, and then Roxanne, if you have another one.
Yeah, you really have to go use case by use case to identify that. So my advice is to have your global AI policy, your use policy, your principles, and then at the department level, make a department level policy because they can better determine use cases. So, for example, in procurement, like I said earlier, I did big bold, not AI to evaluate your vendor. Consider that if you're the vendor and you've been evaluated to get this $1 million award and you find out it was AI that evaluated you, are you getting a lawsuit? Probably. So should we use AI for that? Maybe not. So it's not brain surgery, but when the risks are high, you don't want to tempt that fate.
All right. Seth, if you have any thoughts, and then Roxanne, I'll bring it back to you for the last word, and then we can wrap up.
It might be a little controversial because I know a lot of folks are using it for this exact purpose, but I would kind of caution against using it in hiring for kind of exactly the same reasons that Carrie was talking about, just where you have high risk. Because again, if I'm an applicant and I find out I got denied because of an AI tool, that's a lawsuit. And even if even if you did nothing wrong and the tool was not discriminatory, that's still huge expenses, right? Big cost, big effort to defend that. And the law is in a lot of ways moving slowly to catch up with AI, but I think in kind of anti-discrimination focus, it's actually pretty quick. That's the thing that states are focusing on. That's the thing that's going to get you in trouble. And I kind of think it goes in that camp of like low frequency, high risk. Like unless you're hiring 10 people a day, it's like maybe just worth putting in the manpower to review these things manually so that you just don't even raise the risk, I suppose.
Yeah.
I think that's such a good point, and something we're seeing a lot with our customers is that they're rolling out AI training because the point of this is a tech problem or a people problem. Is like the answer is it's both. You can have the best, IT systems in the world, but people are people, and so I'm seeing our customers do things like role specific AI training, and one of the first areas they target is hiring teams. So they put into the training, whether you're using Athena or a different platform, like make sure you can customize it to really be specific about if you're a hiring manager at your company, what systems are you allowed to use and aren't you allowed to use? And and marketing teams are usually the ones that are picked first because those are two high risk areas. And then another really clever thing I'm doing just to leave people with, maybe something that they feel like is actionable and not too difficult is I'm seeing companies marry is it a tech or is it a people thing by provisioning and deprovisioning AI tool access based on training and or policy attestations. What I mean by that is maybe at your company, if you are going to let people use an enterprise ChatGPT license, you have them go through your AI and compliance training first, and only then are they going to be able to get access to ChatGPT. And then if they've lapsed on their training, the access is going to automatically, we do it through an API. So if you're an Athena customer and you want to turn this on, just talk to your CSM. And what that does is it kind of like takes away one step, one automated step that compliance people need to worry about, and ensures that the employee is getting context on the AI that is really specific to their roles and their tools.
That is a very good idea. All right, well, we are now out of time, but this has been a great discussion. So Seth Bahraini from 650.com, Carrie Miller from the AI Procurement Lab, thank you both very much. You gave us a ton to think about here. I know that we have our next session in 2 weeks' time, where I believe we are talking about how AI is going to transform reporting. And then we've got 3 more after that. So thank you again, everybody. And Roxanne, I don't know if you have any other farewell comments, but it's been great.
Thank you, Matt. And thank you to the participants. This was really, really interesting. So I appreciate everyone's time and really thoughtful questions, and to the panelists, really thoughtful answers. Thanks all.
Thanks for having me.